The time is precisely 1:15 p.m. This is the Sri Lanka Broadcasting Corporation. Here's the news edited by Romesh Piris and read by Chandima Veerakon. Headlines. Sri Lanka's creditors likely to reach debt reduction deal this month. The online safety bill presented to Parliament. Sri Lanka suspends emergency procurement of medicine. A new motor vehicle revenue license issuing system to be implemented from this Saturday. The largest Asia-Pacific Environmental Forum to get underway in Colombo. The newly appointed German ambassador to Sri Lanka assures continued support in achieving a sustainable economic and financial recovery. In international news, the World Health Organization recommends malaria vaccine that will be rolled out next year. In sports news, Sri Lanka to take on Afghanistan in a World Cup warm-up game in Guwahati today. Local stories in detail. Sri Lanka's major creditors such as Japan, India and France are likely to reach a broad agreement this month on debt reduction steps including extending repayments, Japan's Sankei newspaper reported on Monday. Sri Lanka has held multiple rounds of talks with bondholders and bilateral creditors including Japan, China and India on reworking its foreign debt after suspending repayments in May last year. A group of Sri Lankans major creditors including the United States, Japan and India want to sign a memorandum of understanding with the country around the time of the International Monetary Fund and World Bank meetings later this month in Morocco. China has resisted joining the group, but it remains an observer. China, its largest single creditor, accounts for 42% of Sri Lanka's overall external debt, followed by Japan on 24%, India at 15% and France at 4%. The online safety bill was tabled in Parliament today by the Public Security Minister Tiran Alas. According to the bill, the commission of 5 individuals appointed by the President will be empowered to block any social media account, prosecute, fine and even imprison individuals. The online safety bill, dated the 15th of September 2023, was gazetted by order of the Minister of Public Security. The online safety bill is to establish the Online Safety Commission and to prevent the use of online accounts and inauthentic online accounts for prohibited purposes and other related matters. Meanwhile, the debate on the Elections Special Provisions Bill will take place in Parliament today. Parliament convened for the first time this month at 9:30 a.m. Following official statements and oral questions, MPs are scheduled to commence the second reading debate on the Elections Special Provisions Bill. Moreover, the debate on the Civil Procedure Code Amendment Bill, regulations under the Mediation Special Categories of Disputes Act and the order under the Judicature Act are scheduled to be taken up for debate between 10:30 a.m. and 5 p.m. Subsequently, from 5 p.m. to 5:30 p.m., the motion at the adjournment time by the government will be taken up for debate. Health Minister Keheliya Rambukwala announced that a decision has been taken to halt the emergency purchases of medicinal drugs with immediate effect. Speaking to the media at the Health Ministry, the minister said that more than 90% of drugs are currently imported from India and Bangladesh. The minister further said that he has personally discussed with both governments with regard to the direct purchase of drugs. Discussions with the government of India have been successfully completed. He further said that the drug shortage, which prevailed in the country from 2020 to 2021, has already been settled and currently there is no need for the emergency purchase of drugs. This news comes to you from the Sri Lanka Broadcasting Corporation. Continuing with the local stories, the 5th Asia-Pacific Forum of Ministers and Environment Authorities, the largest regional environmental event in the Asia-Pacific region, is scheduled to get underway in Colombo today. The international event, with the participation of 41 member countries of UNEP Asia Pacific, is scheduled to be worked off till the 6th of October. This forum is jointly organized by the Ministry of Environment and the United Nations Environment Programme. Organizers expect more than 300 foreign delegates and 100 professionals to engage in discussions alongside stakeholders from Sri Lanka. The primary objective of this ministerial forum is to provide regional inputs for the 6th session of the United Nations Environment Assembly, scheduled from the 24th of February to the 1st of March 2024 in Nairobi. The National Day of the Federal Republic of Germany is celebrated today. The day marks the German reunification in 1990 as a unitary state. The Felix Neumann was interviewed by the state broadcaster, the Sri Lanka Broadcasting Corporation. The newly appointed German ambassador to Sri Lanka, His Excellency Dr. Felix Neumann, was interviewed by the state broadcaster, the Sri Lanka Broadcasting Corporation, this morning. Ambassador acknowledged the close relations and diplomatic bilateral ties between the two countries, which began 70 years ago. He assured that Germany will continue to support Sri Lanka in achieving a sustainable economic and financial recovery as well as its development goals. To conclude the local news, the headlines again. Sri Lanka's creditors likely to reach debt reduction deal this month. The online safety bill presented to Parliament. Sri Lanka suspends emergency procurement of medicine. The new motor vehicle revenue license issuing system to be implemented from this Saturday. The largest Asia-Pacific Environmental Forum to get underway in Colombo. The newly appointed German ambassador to Sri Lanka assures continued support in achieving a sustainable economic and financial recovery. On international news, the World Health Organization recommends malaria vaccine that will be rolled out next year. That concludes the local news for now.
The main news story is brought to you by Sinhala Mahatmya.
Taking a look at the main news story, the National Building Research Organization has issued early landslide warnings for several areas in 8 districts as heavy rainfall continues. Accordingly, a Level 2 Amber Advisory is in place for several areas in Galle, Kalutara, Kandy, Kergol, Matara and Ratnapura districts until 5 p.m. today. Meanwhile, a Level 1 Yellow Warning is effective in the following areas: Colombo District, Sitabaka Divisional Secretariat Division; Galle District, Alpitia Divisional Secretariat Division; Hambantota District, Walasmulla Divisional Secretariat Division; Kalutara District, Agalavatta, Matugama, Bulat Sinhala and Walallavita Divisional Secretariat Divisions; Kergol District, Dehiyawita, Yatiyantota and Kagalla Divisional Secretariat Divisions; Matara District, Mulatiyana and Aturaliya Divisional Secretariat Divisions; Ratnapura District, Kolonna and Imbulpe Divisional Secretariat Divisions. The NBRO urges the people living in aforementioned areas to be on alert about possibility of landslides, slope failures, rock falls, cutting failures and ground subsidence. That concludes the main news story.
The main news story was brought to you by Sinhala Mahatmya.
Taking a look at Watchlight, all liquor outlets in the island will be closed tomorrow in view of the World Temperance Day. The World Temperance Day is annually observed on the 3rd of October with the aim of raising public awareness of the temperance movement and to encourage moderation and, more often, complete abstinence in the use of alcoholic beverages. Accordingly, the Excise Department has issued the order preventing the sale of alcohol at all licensed liquor outlets today. That ends Watchlight. Moving on to the world news, the headlines. The World Health Organization recommends malaria vaccine that will be rolled out next year. The EU dismisses doubts over long-term commitment to Ukraine in Kyiv meeting. Bushfires in parts of southeast Australia amid a spring heat wave. The World Health Organization recommends on Monday the use of a second malaria vaccine to curb the life-threatening disease spread to humans by some mosquitoes. Almost exactly 2 years ago, WHO recommended the broad use of the world's first malaria vaccine called RTSS, who the WHO chief Tedros Adhanom announced at a news briefing in Geneva that the WHO is recommending a second vaccine called R21/Matrix-M to prevent malaria in children at risk of the disease. The vaccine, developed by Britain's University of Oxford, will become available to countries by mid-2024. The European Union has brushed aside questions over whether the bloc will remain committed to assisting Ukraine in the long term as schisms over the issue begin to form in the United States and Europe. A delegation of EU foreign ministers made an unannounced visit to the Ukraine capital, Kyiv, on Monday, offering an image of cohesion and reiterating their support for the country's struggle against Russia's invasion. EU Foreign Policy Chief Joseph Borrell described the gathering as historic, but made clear there would be no new concrete announcements. A bushfire in Australia's Victoria state more than trebled overnight, and authorities urged residents in a remote part of Tasmania state to evacuate as a spring heat wave fanned fires across the country's southeast. Around 17,000 hectares were ablaze as of this morning in the eastern part of Victoria state Gippsland region after high winds spread fires overnight. Across the Bay Strait in Tasmania state, residents on the northern edge of Flinders Island were told to evacuate from an out-of-control bushfire. To end the world news, the headlines again. The World Health Organization recommends malaria vaccine that will be rolled out next year. The EU dismisses doubts over long-term commitment to Ukraine in Kyiv meeting. Bushfires in parts of southeast Australia amid a spring heat wave. That ends the world news.
Development news.
And on the development news, State Minister of Technology Kanaka Herath has confirmed that the new Motor Vehicle Revenue Licence Issuing System ERL 2.0 will be implemented from the 7th of October. The State Minister noted that the new system will be introduced in all provinces except for the Western Province. He further emphasized that through the system, revenue licenses can be obtained via online. State Minister Herath shared these details during a news conference held at the Presidential Media Centre under the theme Collective Path to a Stable Country. That ends the development news. We move on to the sports news. ICC Cricket World Cup warm-up matches 2023. Afghanistan will be locking horns with Sri Lanka in the 8th match of the ICC Cricket World Cup warm-up matches 2023 later today. The Baraspara Cricket Stadium in Guwahati will play host to this encounter. Afghanistan didn't get any chance to take the field on last Friday as their warm-up fixture against South Africa was washed out due to rain. The game is scheduled to get underway at 2 p.m. local time. Meanwhile, former Sri Lanka skipper Kumar Sangakkara has been appointed as the new chairman of the Marylebone Cricket Club Cricket Committee. Sangakkara earlier held the post of president, which will now be taken over by Mark Nicholas. Kumar Sangakkara served as president of the committee since 2021. Former skipper Kumar Sangakkara became the first non-British person to occupy the position when he took up the role in 2019. In the new role, he will be taking over the reins from Mike Gatting, who served for 6 years in the role as the chair of the World Cricket Committee. That ends sports news.
Go ekak tiyana youth eකට life එකේ change එකට නියමෙට set වෙන්න ඇස් වහගෙන දැකපු ගීන හැබැයි කරන්න youth එකට නියමෙට set වෙන්න friendship එක මෙන්න.
The all-new NSB Ithru Mithru account, NSB IM, a plan for your dream.
Business News, sponsored by National Savings Bank, the safest place for your money.
And on business news, Waterwala Plantations plc, Sri Lanka's leading diversified agribusiness company, marked a significant milestone in the country's agricultural landscape with the opening of its state-of-the-art cinnamon processing centre in Udugama, Galle. Completed with an investment of 90 million rupees, this facility is one of the largest cinnamon processing centres in Sri Lanka, which operates under good manufacturing practices standards. Spanned across over 100 hectares of cinnamon cultivated land, the centre will have an annual output of 100,000 kilos of processed cinnamon in 2 harvesting seasons. Furthermore, it will generate more than 200 direct and indirect job opportunities, contributing to the community's socio-economic development by providing jobs and stimulating economic growth in the Udugama area. That ends business news.
Business news. Sponsored by National Savings Bank, the safest place for your money.
Go ekak tiyana youth ekata life ekේ change ekata niyamata set wenna as wahagena dagapu hina habe karanna youth ekata niyamata set wenna friendship එක menna.
The all new NSB Ithru account, NSB IM, a plan for your dream.
And on economic news, Sri Lanka recorded over $1,000 million in export revenue in the month of August 2023, making this the highest export revenue earned in a month of this year, according to the Central Bank of Sri Lanka. Accordingly, export revenue of $1,119 million in total was recorded in the month of August 2023. In comparison to the export revenue earned last year, however, this figure is 8.7% lower than the export revenue earned in August 2022. Meanwhile, the total export revenue earned from January to August 2023 stands at a total of $8,010 million, 10.1% lower than the income earned during the corresponding period 2022. CBSL attributed the decrease in export revenue mainly due to the decrease in demand for local products in the foreign markets. That ends economic news.
Weather report.
And finally, we take a look at the weather report. The Department of Meteorology says a showery condition in the southwestern part of the island is expected to enhance during next few days from today. The Met Department accordingly predicts showers or thundershowers at times in the western, Sabaragamuwa, southern and northwestern provinces and in the Kandy and Nuwara Eliya districts today. It added fairly heavy showers above 75 mm can be expected at some places in the western, Sabaragamuwa and southern provinces. Showers or thundershowers are also likely in several places elsewhere, particularly in the eastern and Uva provinces during the evening or at night. Meanwhile, the general public has been requested to take adequate precautions to minimize damage caused by temporary localized strong winds and lightning during thunder showers. That ends the weather report. And to conclude this bulletin of news, the headlines again. Sri Lanka's creditors likely to reach debt reduction deal this month. The online safety bill presented to Parliament. Sri Lanka suspends emergency procurement of medicine. The new motor vehicle revenue license issuing system to be implemented from this Saturday. The largest Asia-Pacific Environmental Forum to get underway in Colombo. The newly appointed German ambassador to Sri Lanka assures continued support in achieving a sustainable economic and financial recovery. In international news, the World Health Organization recommends a malaria vaccine that will be rolled out next year. In sports news, Sri Lanka to take on Afghanistan in a World Cup warm-up game in Guwahati today. With that, we conclude this bulletin of news from the Sri Lanka Broadcasting Corporation. Over to my friend and colleague, Victor Raj, to keep you entertained. Over to you, Victor.